Hello guys, and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Today we're going to be looking at some new cards which were released within the Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed Duel GX Duel Box. These are a whole brand new series of cards which have been introduced within Speed Duels, and this is like a short version of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. The whole point is you get through your matches a bit faster. It's meant to be entertaining, but you also get the whole aspect of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. So we'll start with Here Goes Something. The skill activation is flip this card over when you activate the skill. And the effect is, once per duel, you can activate the skill at the start of your battle phase. While you control exactly one elemental hero monster and no other monsters, for the rest of this turn, that one monster gains 800 attack while battling an opponent's monster and can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn. This is quite a decent effect because depending on the elemental hero you choose, if it's elemental hero Blade Edge, that can become a 3400 attack monster, and I think that's towards the higher end of the attack points. You can look at some monsters that are 3000 attack and those become 3800, but if you're looking at, say, the non-fusion ones, I think Blade Edge tends to be that cutoff point. It also has the ability to attack absolutely everything, so you can consider it like Blade Edge with the Wild Edge effect. I think there's also another card which is a similar style of effect, which is called Feather Shot, used by elemental hero Avion, and that's purpose is for every elemental hero you have on your field, elemental hero Avian can attack an opponent's monster once each for that number of elemental heroes. It's very much in keeping with how they like to play. It's a simple enough strategy and it's very easy to counter, but it does what it's needed to. Powerful Group of Guys is a skill which activates when flip this card over when you activate the skill. The effect is while you control exactly one Destiny hero monster and no other monsters, and your opponent controls more monsters than you, special summon one Destiny hero monster from your hand or deck with a lower level than the monster you control. You can only special summon Destiny hero monsters during the turn you activate this skill. Flip this card over at the end of the turn you activated this skill. The whole purpose of this card is it allows you just to go into one of your other Destiny hero monsters. It has to be a lower level, so if you've got a high level monster out there, you've got more options. Obviously, the lower the level you go for as your target, the lower and less options you've got. So it's actually quite decent for field advantage and to develop field presence. Land of Ojamas has a skill activation at the start of the duel. Flip this card over and place it in your field spell zone. The effect, once per turn, you can send one Ojama card from your hand to the graveyard, special summon one Ojama monster from your graveyard. While you control an Ojama monster, switch the original attack and defense of all monsters on the field. This is an actual card and it is their field spell. It does exactly what it says here. You're just able to special summon Ojama monsters, so it's really good if you need to spam the field for whatever reason. It also provides you with that opportunity to flip your Ojama monsters and your opponent's monsters attack and defense. Ojamas have 0 attack and 1000 defense. They all become 1000 attack from this effect. Alternatively, if your opponents have strong attack monsters, but they happen to be in attack mode and they've got barely any defense points, think of something like Goblin Elite Attack Force, which has 0 defense, then it becomes 0 attack and your Ojama monsters can then get over that monster. Ancient Fusion requires you to flip this card over to activate the skill. The effect is once per duel you can discard one card to fusion summon one Ancient Gear monster from your extra deck using monsters from your field as fusion material. If one of those materials is an Ancient Gear Golem monster, you can also use monsters from your hand and or deck as the other material. Your opponent takes no damage for the rest of this turn. Any battle damage your opponent takes from that fusion monster is halved. This is really decent because this just allows you to fusion summon very easily. It can be using cards from your hand and or deck. If you happen to use Ancient Gear Golem as half the material, that's decent because rather than the disadvantages that a lot of fusion monsters have from fusing from the hand, which wastes a load of your cards, by fusing from the deck you're not wasting anything, and when those cards are actually in the graveyard you might be able to easily access them more so than you would from a deck. The only downside is you do require halving the damage your fusion monster inflicts during the turn, but there has to be some type of balance. Cyberblade Fusion is a skill which requires you to flip this over to activate it. The effect is once per turn you can discard one card to fusion summon one Cyberblader by sending either Etrel Cyber or Blade Skater from your field to the graveyard as one fusion material, and the other material from your hand, field or deck to the graveyard. That Cyberblader gains 400 attack. This skill can be used twice per duel. This was the original boss monster that Alexis Rose had within Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Season 1. It wasn't particularly that good. It had basically 3 effects. The first was it prevented you from being destroyed in battle so long as your opponent had one monster on their field. If they had two, it would become a 4,200 attack monster, and 3, it would negate the effects of all face-up cards on your opponent's field. So I would argue that the third effect is probably the best because it actually shuts down what your opponent can do, but this was very heavily reliant on what your opponent had on their field. The ability to fusion summon is decent because one of them has to be from the hand, okay, but the other one can be from either the hand, the field, or the deck, so you do have that flexibility to summon the Cyberblader, and it does become a 2,500 attack monster once you add in those 400 additional attack points. Crystal Transcendence has the skill activation, flip this card over when you activate this skill. The effect is you can only summon or set crystal monsters and dragon monsters while the skill is face up. Once per turn during your main phase, you can send up to 3 cards from your hand to your graveyard, then choose that many crystal beast monsters with different names from your deck and place them in your spell and trap zone as continuous spell cards. This skill can only be used twice per duel. The purpose of this card is to have as many of your crystal beast monsters go into your spell and trap zones as possible. The more of those monsters are in the field zone and in the spell and trap zone, the more likely you are to go into your boss monster, the Rainbow Dragon itself. It requires all 7 crystal beasts to be present before you have to send those to the graveyard to special summon it. This just helps to speed up the process. Forbidden Cyber Style Technique has the skill activation, flip this card over when you activate the skill, and the effect, activate the skill once per duel if your life points are 1,500 or less and you control no monsters. Reduce your life points to 50, then special summon up to 3 machine cyber monsters from your hand, deck, and or graveyard. They each become Cyber Dragon, machine attribute, light, level 5, 2,100 attack, and 1,600 defense, and cannot be attributed. For the rest of this turn, you cannot summon or set except by fusion summoning, nor attack except with fusion monsters. Destroy any monsters summoned by the skill during your end phase. This is a very all-in type of effect, and it's very risky because you're using it when you've got 1,500 or less life points, and you're reducing your points down to 50. If your opponent has any burn cards that even do things like a couple of 100 points of damage, that's you instantly out of the game after using this effect. But it does come with a positive side in that you summon 3 machine cyber monsters. They each get treated as Cyber Dragon, so you can use them for alternative cards. So you can use them for Cyber Laser Dragon, Cyber Barrier Dragon, or you can use them for the fusion, so Cyber End Dragon, Cyber Twin Dragon, Chimera Tech Over Dragon, any of those cards. And because those are fusion monsters, that means they can attack. You need to OTK them in that turn. Otherwise, any monsters that have been summoned do kind of get destroyed, and you do need to use those monsters in advance. The benefits are, so long as you fusion summoned and use those cards correctly, because those cards have been used as part of a fusion summon, they are no longer part of the field. Those other monsters are new monsters and will not be subject to the same effect, destruction of this skill. Blaze Accelerator Deployment has the skill activation, flip this card when you activate this skill. The effect, once per turn, you can change the name of one Blaze Accelerator you control to Tri-Blaze Accelerator. This skill can be used twice per duel. The purpose of this is, I believe it's their volcanic monster, Doomfire, that requires you to tribute off a Tri-Blaze Accelerator in order to special summon it. The problem with this is if you've just got your normal Blaze Accelerator, then you can't actually tribute that to bring out that monster. At least by treating it by the secondary name, this means you can actually speed out the card if you've got it in your hand, avoiding, having a brick or having to hard draw into the Tri-Blaze Accelerator. The right hero for the job skill activation is flip this card over when you activate this skill. The effect is once per duel during your main phase, you can shuffle 1 elemental hero monster you control into your deck and special summon 1 level 4 or lower elemental hero monster from your main deck with a different name than the shuffled card. The main idea of this card is if you've got the fusion materials for a certain elemental hero and you happen to have one of the cards but not the other, by using this skill you're just able to shuffle what you don't need and trade that in for an elemental hero that you do need that has the name you require, provided it is level 4 or lower. This does mean that there can be issues with certain cards. It's fine for things such as fusing into Thunder Giant, into Clayman, into most of their fusions, it's okay. But when you're looking at things such as Wild Edge, for example, if you've got Wild Heart already on your field, you can't search for the Blade Edge. That's a big disadvantage of it. You've also got things such as Necroid Shaman. If you've got Wild Heart on your field, you can't search for Necro Shaman because Necroshade is a level 5 monster, so it does have those restrictions to it. Looking into the future has the skill activation. Flip this card over when you activate this skill. The effect, during your main phase, you can look at the top 3 cards of your deck and return them in any order. You cannot activate spell cards the turn you use the skill. Flip this card over at the end of the turn you activated this skill. This is meant to be in pair with Destiny Hero Diamond Dude. Its effect is you flip over the top card of your deck. If it happens to be a normal spell card, you send it to the graveyard, and during the standby phase of your next turn, you get to just activate that card without having to pay any costs. That's a major advantage of it because it avoids things such as discard or cost life points, anything that's usually an adverse aspect of a particularly powerful card. And this does keep in mind with the whole storyline of Aster Phoenix and his whole kind of shtick to do with looking into the future and controlling people's futures and their destinies, hence the word Destiny Heroes. It does look at the top 3 cards, so you do have the benefit of seeing what you want and returning them in the order you desire. Think of it a little bit like Card Shuffler, but a little bit less good. It does give you that future insight, so you know, okay, if I go with this move and this move, maybe I will get this outcome, whereas if I go with this move, maybe I can do this. Armed and Ready, it has the skill activation. Flip this card over when you activate the skill. The effect, once per duel during your main phase, you can send one level monster you control to the graveyard, and special summon the level monster mentioned in its text from your hand, deck, or graveyard, as if it was summoned by the sent monster's effect. This is meant to work with Chaz Princeton and his armed dragons. Most of those monsters tend to name a specific monster within them, and some of them are a little bit more restrictive than others. Both 3 and 5 are easy enough to summon and can be actually summoned either by just normally summoning the level 3, or tribute summoning the level 5 if you absolutely need to. Level 7 has to be brought out by the effect of level 5, which is when level 5 destroys a monster in battle. During the end phase, you basically get to trade it in for the level 7 version, and the level 10 version can only usually be normal summoned by, well, it can't be normal summoned, it has to be special summoned by attributing the level 7, so you actually have to have the level 7 before you get to the level 10. This creates many disadvantages because if you've got multiple of these level monsters in your hand, you can't do anything. With this skill, you can bypass some of the stages, and each of them have their own effects. Level 5, you can destroy a monster your opponent controls that has attack equal to or less than the attack of the monster you discard for its effect. The level 7 does the same thing, but it actually wipes out any face-up monsters your opponent controls with the same level of attack or lower, and the level 10 version just destroys a card. So each has a discard cost, but each has that benefit, which is also quite decent of this card because it recovers those monsters not only from the hand or the deck, but also the graveyard. So if you filled your graveyard up, you can still access from there. Middle-Aged Mechs is the skill activation at the start of your first turn of the duel. Flip this card over and place it in your center spell and trap zone. The effect, all ancient gear monsters gain a 300 attack. Each time a monster is normal summoned or set, place 1 counter on this card. If you tribute summon an ancient gear monster face up, you can tribute this card instead, if the number of its counters is equal to or greater than the number of required tributes. This card has been used very commonly by Dr. Crowler. Basically, you know, for your tributes, you need at most 2 tribute counters. So if you use it on your turn, activate it first, summon a monster, that's 1 counter already. If your opponent summons a monster, that's 2 counters already. And then you can just get rid of it to summon one of your more difficult to summon ancient gear monsters. So for example, Ancient Gear Golem can be a bit of a nightmare without this card. Alternatively, if you just keep it on the field, it gives your Ancient Gear monsters an additional 300 attack points. Not a bad effect, and it's useful for what they need. It gives a balance of not only the boosting effect, but to use it as part of the tribute if you're in a difficult situation. Machine Angel Ascension has skill activation. Flip this card over when you activate the skill. The effect, once per turn during your main phase, you can use one of these skills, but each can only be used once per duel. Discard 1 spell, then add 1 Cyber Angel Ritual monster or 1 Machine Angel Ritual spell from your deck to your hand. Or shuffle 1 Cyber Angel Ritual monster or 1 Machine Angel Ritual spell from your graveyard into the deck. These were the more powerful monsters that Alexis Rhodes started to use, the Cyber Angels. The first part of the effect to just discard a spell card card, being able to search for either the ritual monster or the machine angel ritual spell means that if you've got the other card in your hand, you're more likely to be able to ritual summon on that turn. It means that you don't have to run things such as Senju and Manju of the Thousand Hands, which are typical monsters you have to normal summon first to be able to search for things, and your opponent can always stop those effects. Secondary effect is useful if you've gone into the duel a little bit more into it and you're depleting your cards and you need access to something pretty quickly. By shuffling them back, hopefully you can then search for them a little bit into the future and still use them. Cyber Dark style is a skill activation. Flip this card over when you activate the skill. The effect, once per turn, choose 3 Cyber Dark monsters from your deck. Your opponent randomly adds 1 of them to your hand. Shuffle the other 2 along with 1 card from your hand back into your deck, then flip this card over. This skill can be used up to 3 times, once when your life points are 3,000 or less, once when your life points are 2,000 or less, and once when your life points are 1,000 or less. This was part of Zane's Dark Cyber Monsters archetypes. So the Cyber Darks, you've got Cyber Dark Edge, Eel, and Horn. You also had 2 other ones which were introduced a bit later on when they got further support, and since they're all Cyber Dark monsters, they can each be used by this effect. It is a bit risky the lower life points you've got, and you kind of have to use them in increments. If you've got 3,000 or less, you get the benefit of using the effect, but hopefully if you can actually search into all 3, you do have the advantage of that consistency, and hopefully go into your Cyber Dark Dragon. The disadvantage is that your opponent is able to choose which of the Cyber Dark monsters you happen to have. The only good thing is because it's random, you might end up being in a situation where they choose exactly what you need and you're able to get this effect off anyway. The downside is as well, because of these increments, you really don't want to be getting down to that 1,000 or less life points unless you're not scared of taking any burn damage. If not, good luck to you. Volcanic Cannon has the skill activation. Flip this card over when you activate the skill. As the effect, once per duel, you can send 1 face-up Tri-Blaze Accelerator you control to the graveyard, then special summon 1 Volcanic Doomfire from your hand, deck, or graveyard, ignoring its summoning conditions. Your opponent takes no effect damage the turn you activate this skill. The idea of this card is a bit like the previous effect in that was able to change your Blaze Accelerator into a Tri-Blaze Accelerator. Difference for this is it comes to a point where maybe you don't have your Volcanic Doomfire in your hand. Traditionally, if you've got Tri-Blaze Accelerator on the field and you don't have Doomfire in your hand, you can't access it. It's very difficult to search, and I don't think there are any set specific Volcanic archetype cards that do the searching for you. This bypasses that effect, and if you've already used the card and it happens to be sitting in your graveyard, you can use it still, you can summon it back to the field. Energizing Elements has the skill activation. Flip this card over when you activate the skill. You can declare fire, water, earth, or wind. This turn, monsters with declared attribute gain 500 attack and lose 400 defense. Also, any battle damage they inflict is halved. If you control no monsters with declared attribute, flip this card over. So the idea of this is very much like there's a set of field spells which has this effect. You've got Molten Destruction, you've got a dark version, a light version, you've got a wind version, you've got one for all of the different attributes, and it has the same thing. It gains 500 attack and loses 400 defense, but the difference is that it doesn't actually half the amount of battle damage they inflict, so this is a disadvantage of the effect. It's good for a basic B6 strategy, but other than that, it's very basic to counter. Room for Growth has the skill activation. Flip this card over when you activate the skill, and the effect, during your main phase, you can increase the attack of 1 level 3 or lower monster you control by 300 times its level until the end of this turn. Flip this card over at the end of the turn you activated this skill. At most, your level 3 monster gains another 900 attack points. If you're looking at Hunter Dragon, which I think is the highest end towards that being a level 3 monster, you're looking at a 2,600 attack monster with 1,700 starting and then the extra 900 attack points boosted onto it. That's fine. You are looking at things that can actually get over a Dark Magician, but you have to be quite lucky with that, and you also have to be running a very specific style of deck for this skill to be useful. It can be used multiple times within the duel because there isn't a once per duel or twice per duel limitation of it, but it can only be used on the one monster during that turn. It's not like it occupies and applies its effect to everything. If that was the case, I would absolutely be recommending using this skill as much as you can. Your opponents wouldn't be expecting it, and I think they'd get a bit of a shock if they got beaten by a Hunter Dragon, don't you? I've got Dino Dna is with the skill activation at the start of the duel. Flip this card over. The effect is during each of your draw phases, you gain 200 life points. During your draw phase, if you draw a dinosaur monster for your normal draw, you can reveal it and place it on the bottom of your deck, then draw 1 card. Once per turn during your main phase, you can make one dinosaur monster you control gain 200 attack until the end of this turn. The purpose of this card, the first effect is very much like Marie the Fallen one. You're gaining 200 life points during each of your draw phases. Nothing wrong with that. It's actually quite useful. Might not seem like much, but it slowly builds up and builds up. And if you have to pay life points for any type of effect, this might be able to mitigate at least a little bit of that cost. The other thing you've got to think of, if you happen to draw into a dinosaur monster as part of your normal draw, if it's not what you want, always send it to the bottom of the deck, then draw a new card. Can't complain with that. Always gives you a little bit more options as to what you can do. It can also boost one of your dinosaur monsters by 200 attack points. Very useful for certain types of strategy, especially beatdown, and can be enough to decimate and be the difference between finishing your opponent during that turn or having to wait another turn in which your opponent then gets the chance to respond and then beat over your monsters. And the final skill is Consumed by Darkness. It's the skill activation. During your turn, you can flip this card over and place it in your field spell zone. The effect, all crystal beast monsters on the field and in the graveyard become dark. If an ultimate crystal monster attacks, negate the effects of the attack target during that battle phase. During damage calculation, if a crystal beast monster you control battles and you would take damage, you can send one crystal beast monster from your deck to the graveyard. You take no battle damage from that battle. So again, I think this is a very decent type of effect. It was used by Yubel. The whole idea was to get her Rainbow Dart Dragon out onto the field by sending as many of the crystal beasts to the graveyard and being able to get them all in one place to then just special summon it. In doing so, you're able to meet those targets relatively easily, and you're also able to negate any of your opponent's effects, which is also quite decent. I would say that it does protect you and your life points from any sort of damage. If your opponent is trying to go for an OTK strategy, that's a good way of preventing it. Kind of downside of it is it's a very simplistic type of effect and it can be undermined very quickly. So the best way to kind of use this card is running it as a very pure style of Crystal Beast deck. What do you guys think of these various cards and skills? For me personally, I do like most of them. I think they all have a place within the deck and they actually follow a lot of the storylines of the characters. My only concern, especially for the volcanic one, is it's very limiting and you need a lot more volcanic archetype support in order for it to be kind of deemed viable or at least justified in its type of effects. Whatever you guys think, I'd love to hear those in the comments down below. And if you enjoy the comments, if you enjoy the videos, make sure to subscribe. I really appreciate it and I'm so thankful for anyone who does that. Have a nice day.